Hey everyone out there, Daniela from Redesign Your Life here, and today we are going to talk about something that is absolutely everywhere. It is compassion fatigue, particularly at this time of year. You will definitely have run into it if you don't already live in it 24/7. So let's dive right in and see what it is, what are some of the symptoms, and how you can deal with it. Let's dive in. Everyone, I hope you had an absolutely fabulous holiday celebrating with all of your friends and family. And here we are coming up to the new year. We are literally hours away from the new year. And so I wanted to talk to you about something today that really hits home for me and was a very big struggle for me. And I know that it is most likely a very large struggle for you and a lot of people that you know as well. And so coming to the new year, let's give you a tool to start to redesign your life for real. That's not a marketing gimmick. I actually had to, basically, throw out all the throw out all the books and start from scratch and, go back to the drawing board and redesign my life. Because I was suffering with so many of these things that we talk about, the burnout, the stress, and today the compassion fatigue. We labor under these things for, years and years and years and years, and we don't realize it until it gets to the point where our lives are so devastated and they're so in shambles and we are in so much physical, mental, emotional, spiritual pain that we just absolutely, collapse and, give it up to God, and then, like you have to go through the whole devastation of it all. So in order to, hopefully curb some of that, we are going to be talking about compassion fatigue today, because knowledge is power. And if we, know what we're dealing with, we can know how to fix it and how to work through it and work with it instead of working against it, and actually work it through our lives and out and through, instead of holding everything in and keeping it the way that it is. So let's get started. All right. Compassion fatigue is defined as something that is experienced by people who take care of other people and animals, particularly. It's a state that is characterized by a very, very extreme tension and particularly a preoccupation with the person's suffering that that the healer or caregiver is working with. So much so, in fact, this preoccupation, this obsession almost, with, the suffering that someone else is going through, or some other thing is being is going through, to the point where the caregiver actually experiences a secondary traumatic stress from over putting themselves in the other person's shoes. Basically, you're putting on the other person's shoes, and not only are you walking a mile in them, but you're walking around the whole world and then taking the shoes home and keeping them in your closet. That's basically what we're doing as caregivers and healers. And that can be, that can range from anything, from a coach to someone who works in an animal shelter, to someone who works with, sick kids at the Shriners Hospital, to someone who works with the elderly in a home. I mean, really, God, it runs the gambit. It absolutely runs the gambit. Taking care of your younger siblings or your aging parents, and still trying to balance your life. All of these things. Especially for those of us who have naturally, spiritually, I should say, particularly been called to be caregivers and healers. This is the number one thing that is going to kill us. Number one thing. It's what's going to kill us, if we don't get a handle on it. Just like stress is a killer, You know, we can all admit that stress is a killer. And if you don't believe at this point that stress is a killer, please, I implore you to go and do your own research, because stress is absolutely a killer. And it is, you know, up there in the top 3 causes of cardiovascular problems. And cardiovascular, you know, disease and death is the number 1 reason we die. It's because our heart fails, and our heart fails. The number 1 reason our heart fails, you know, top 3, is because we're too stressed out. And I laugh because it's so amazingly prevalent, you know, and I've come to this place in my life that, you know, you have to be able to bring a little bit of humor to this absolutely devastating and traumatic stuff, because if you can't, then that's when it destroys you. Like, if you can't bring a little levity to the situation and realize that, hey, you know, we are indeed all walking around in VR suits, you know, like you see the people with the goggles going, oh my God, it's so realistic. Please don't get me started. That's a whole nother video. But really, you know, that's our experience, is that, you know, we're walking around in VR suits, Laura. But that's how this happens. You know, compassion fatigue is basically when we care so much about everything and everyone else around us to the point where we do not give anything to ourselves, and we have given everything away out of our energy cup, including the cup. Sound like you? Sounded like me for a very long time, I'll tell you that. Ask the people who know me. They know. They've seen me. They've seen me at the bottom. And now we're here. Sorry, I had to. So, compassion fatigue was originally coined, the term was originally coined by a man named Dr. Charles Figley in about 1995, if I'm correct. Originally, he was a Vietnam psychiatrist, or psychologist, I should say, and you can imagine the kinds of devastatingly traumatic things that he heard from the wounded warriors that came back. So, in his process of working with the soldiers that came back, he discovered that over time that his quality of life absolutely went tanked. It just went right in the crapper, and he couldn't figure out why. He came up with compassion fatigue, which basically, you know, is the point to where, you know, that we help people so much, and that we get so invested. That's what it is, really, is that when we invest so much of our energy, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, when we invest so much of our energy into the suffering of the people and the beings, you know, that could be animals, like I said, that we're trying to help, that it in turn causes us to experience traumatic suffering, which is crazy. It's crazy, but we do it because, you know, all of us that are called to be caregivers and healers, and the ones, you know, that are the pillars, you know, for our families and our communities, if you do not take care of yourself, it's going to be the death of you, because of the way that we're integrated, because of what our, you know, how our reality functions, the laws upon which our reality functions, like gravity. You know, the law of attraction is a law like gravity, and it works. And so if you are, you know, have a high preoccupation, and you're, you know, 100%, you know, you're so invested in everybody else's stuff around you and not your own health, what do you think's going to happen? Right? It's what happened to a lot of us. So, you know, what are some of the symptoms that we can go through really quickly here? Some of them would include isolating yourself away from people, you know, all of your friends and family, basically becoming a hermit. Because, you know, you're mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally exhausted, and, you know, you are basically, your subconscious is dreading having to interact with anyone because it assumes that they're going to want something from you. Number 1. So number 2 is going to be an emotional outburst, you know, unprovoked, we'll say. And I don't mean, you know, like crying at a wedding or a birth, you know, or something like that, or something that is absolutely tragic. But I'm talking about, you know, going into a room and saying, hey, so-and-so, how's it going? Oh, I see you. Hey, you changed your hair. And then that person bursts out in tears. What? That person is dealing with compassion fatigue. That is like a huge signifier. that you have overexerted every single aspect of your being, and that it is really time to recenter and really take some time for yourself. And I don't mean take a 2-week, vacation to Hawaii, which, mind you, there's nothing wrong with taking a 2-week vacation to Hawaii. But if you don't do the inner work, if you don't, they say inner work, it's almost getting to the point where it's like a dreaded word. You're like, oh, inner work, but if you don't work, if you don't man in the mirror it, right? It's not going to change. Because how many of you have gone to therapists already? Because you're fucking burnt out. How many of you have gone to medical doctors already? Because your body feels like absolute hammered shit and you don't know why. And there's nothing technically wrong with you. I'm telling you. I'm bringing to you because I've been through it. I've been through every single one of these things. I've isolated myself. I've been through that phase of having emotional outbursts all the time. Physical ailments, the physical ailments, they will manifest themselves. You get the chronically sore neck, the chronic headaches, migraines. If that is not a sign that your body is hollering at you to stop, I don't know what is, kids. To the point where your body causes your head to hurt so bad that it's actually debilitating. We're just not listening to our body anymore, okay? That is so much of what's happening now, is that we're just not taught to listen to our body and trust our body and our intuition. We're taught to trust and value the opinion and of everyone else around us, everything outside of us but ourselves, which is really where all this trouble is coming in. As you will find out, the deeper and deeper you go down your own personal rabbit hole. But for me, I know the physical ailments certainly showed up in the form of digestive problems, which is, one of the number one ways it'll show up. Like I said, big headaches, neck, shoulder problems, because that's where we carry the burden, right? I just felt my neck pop. Wow. Digestive problems, in our gut, hanging onto that gut, in our lower back, also, your hips, your knees, those major joints, any place that carries the load. Sound familiar? And then you're like, oh, well, that's just coincidence. Hunty, there is no coincidence. Everything is connected. The fact that you're even sitting here listening to me gabber on about this topic is connected. So take heed. I'm not just talking out my butt here, to entertain myself. I am actually giving knowledge to you so that you can look at yourself and look at your life and go, oh my God, this is what's happening. And now that you have the knowledge of that's what's happening, you can actually do something about it. That's how it manifested for me, is that stomach problem where basically I could not get up any morning ever without having to puke. There was nothing in there to throw up. Just bile. Ugh, I know. Gross, right? I know. And it's TMI, but it's not that bad. But I'm trying to give you an example of, how it can manifest in your body, because it literally couldn't get up, did not matter how, what I did, didn't matter how much liquid I drank before, during, or after. It literally got to the point where my body was hollering at me to stop. And you just ignore it, and ignore it, and you ignore it, and you shove it down, and you shove it down, and you shove it down. And then your body fails. And we die. So don't let it get to that point. Another thing that's really going to be noticeable, probably for other people around you more so than yourself, and that's where the self-test comes in, is that you have an overarching sort of persistent veil of sadness or apathy or basically where everything is crap and you honestly believe that there's nothing you can do about it, that this is the way it is, that I am the way I am, which let me tell you is my number one pet peeve ever at this point, is that, oh, it's just how I am. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time, but they feel like you're going to feel like it's just, oh, what's the point? Somebody will come up and show something, something beautiful to you and you'll be like, oh, that's great. That's off. Like you can't even enjoy anything without having some sort of criticism or some sort of correction. You have to have some sort of input, like you can't just admire the beauty of it for what it is. Like there's it shows up in a lot of different ways. But it's definitely the constant, persistent, oh, woe is me. A persistent victim mentality, which is just a mentality. We'll get into that in another video too. But those are going to be your sort of number one indicators that you are dealing with compassion fatigue. You're isolating yourself away. You have emotional outbursts that aren't warranted. You have physical ailments and problems that you really should not be having. You've got an us versus them mentality where it's, all about, everything is outside of yourself. Like anything that's going to solve anything is out there. And, like I don't have access to it. And, the sadness and apathy. So how does this happen to us? Why does this happen to us? A lot of it stems from our childhood, as you might imagine, as a lot of things do. When we're little sponges, little sponge humans, and we're not taught to trust our inner intuition. In fact, it's looked down upon for some, like it's looked down upon to follow our intuition and to follow our heart, and that all of the approval must come from outside somewhere. Like that is the number one thing, one of the number one, because there's a lot of number ones. I have a lot of number ones. But that is really, a huge, huge thing is that, we're taught that validation and acceptance has to come from outside of ourself. Sound familiar? And so that's why, we deal with, a lot of things like how we deal with them. When we are little and we see all of these things going on, the alcoholism, the abuse, the craziness, the yelling, the way our parents interact with each other, the way they interact with us, the way they interact with people around them, that they supposedly say they respect or don't respect. All of these things have a profound impact on how we develop our way in the world. And so because of these factors, for many of us, we developed an heightened sense of responsibility because for some reason, because of those things happening to us when we are young, which creates a lack of security, a lack of sense of security, that we're not going to get our basic needs met. And basic needs doesn't just include, food and shelter. It's love too. Love is a basic need. Hate to break it to you. So we develop an overarching, an overachieving sense of responsibility because we feel that it was our fault. That it was our fault that these people were acting the way that they were towards us or towards each other, or that they had these addictions that they had. We feel personally responsible for it. Because of that otherness gets directed at us. And we end up feeling like it's our fault and our responsibility that it is the way it is, and that therefore it is our responsibility to fix it. And then that continues on into adolescence, and it continues on into adulthood to the point where we become, overarching perfectionists and things that are very detrimental to our just natural well-being, because we are constantly trying to save everybody from themselves, which goes with that impulse to rescue everybody. And that we're responsible for how people act and think and interact with one another. Like we feel like we're responsible for them. We're not. I'm gonna break it to you. This is one of the most liberating things that I have ever come to realize in my life. We are not responsible for other people's shit. You're not. You are not. The overdeveloped sense of responsibility leads into the impulse and need to rescue everything. Because we hold on to such a personal responsibility, we feel like we have to rescue everything. I mean, like really, that's kind of, the basis. That's the bottom line. But we cannot take responsibility for when the tree, the leaves are going to fall off the trees, can we? No, you can't. And trying to control everything is really going to just send you into more compassion fatigue. It's really just going to make it worse. So those are the things you want to definitely look out for. Is the isolation, the emotional outbursts, physical ailments, the us versus them, the sadness and apathy, the other directedness, if you have a lack of personal boundaries, of course, the unresolved pain and trauma, and if you really have that overdeveloped responsibility, feeling of responsibility, and that need to, save people, even if it's from themselves. All right, now that we've talked a little bit about what compassion fatigue is, what some of the symptoms are, as well as some of the reasons why we even act the way we act to cause compassion fatigue, let's talk about some of the ways that we can help heal ourselves of it. There's a great quote that says, what doesn't move through and out of us is what defines us. And I find that to be wholeheartedly true. And in that, if there are things that we are not willing to face up to, to look at and say, hey, this is what it is, and then to not pass judgment. That is the thing that is the toughest thing. That, one of the toughest things that I've had to go through is to not pass judgment on myself, because for so much of my life, I have valued everyone else's opinion of me and, what my art is, or, like whatever I've presented to them, whether that be just, myself and bearing my soul to people, or, whether it be my art or a letter or, even these videos. If you don't let it move through you, if you don't release it, it will build up and it will add on to that pile of stuff that we push down and build up and push down and build up and push down, that causes the overexplosion of compassion fatigue. Because these, things like burnout, fatigue, stuff like that, they are the symptoms that's, it's already past due. Kind of like how they say, when you're thirsty, like when you feel the thirst, you're already dehydrated. It's kind of like that. So how do we deal with it, right? My number one thing, and this leads into, everything else that's on this list is, sort of filed under this, but is authentic, sustainable self-care. Now, what does that mean? I'm going to keep talking about self-care for forever. I'm going to talk about self-care until I am blue in the face, because it has the most profound effect on your life. Because we are so not used to giving it to ourselves. As I'm sure you all know, that if you continue on the path that you are down, that is going away from your purpose and away from your highest good, the universe will hit you with a 2x4. If not something bigger. And the more 2x4s you ignore, the bigger they get. So self-care, and what do I mean by authentic self-care? Self-care can be anything. Self-care can be taking a bath. Self-care can be reading a book. Self-care can be going for a walk. It could be doing yoga. It could be singing. It could be doing art, which is my preferred way of self-care, which is why I bring that method to you. That's the authentic part about it. If it doesn't resonate with you, don't do it. Like Chris's post said, like he put on a post of a great list of self-care things. Number one on there is like, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. If it doesn't resonate with you, just let it be and continue on, because that means it's meant for somebody else. So it can be anything, but I must implore you to start a self-care regimen. I must implore you, because it will kill you if you don't. Like, it will run you into the ground if you don't. And I have watched so many people be run into the ground by not taking care of themselves that I cannot even dare to count. So sustainable, that's also what that means, because life has its ups and downs. Life, has a way of getting in the way, right? So it has to be, things that you can do for yourself that you can keep up with, like 5 or 10 minutes of yoga. So say you have to get up and run around one morning. Well, you can stop and do your yoga afterwards. You can do your yoga in the evening. But I must implore you to do something, at least one thing, for yourself a day, so that you can replenish that cup. Another one that goes along with it is that empathic discernment. That's another crazy one that I did not understand for a very, very long time. And not all of us are. I was going to say not all of us are. We all are empathic. We are all psychic. We are all these things. that comes along with the human vehicle, which is really cool. It's part of a standard package. It's just a hidden standard package. Comes standard, but hidden. You got to know what buttons to push, I guess. So if you are already tapped into those gifts, they can be a blessing and a curse. Because you feel everything around you. You feel everyone else around you. And you do not know what's yours and what's theirs. And so that's where having that discernment and those techniques of discernment come in, where you can go, wait, is this me? Is this not me? Oh, it's not me? Oh, okay. And you just let it go, and you're like, oh, okay, off on your merry way, terrible thought, or, like whatever it is. And you move on. That's the thing that, like I was starting to say earlier, is really, really, really hard to do, is to be kind to yourself, because we are so used to being torn down and so used to being degraded and, not being celebrated, that it will probably be one of the biggest challenges of your life, to relearn how to celebrate yourself and relearn that discernment, that an outside opinion does not have to determine how you feel about yourself, which, believe me, that was a hell of a doozy of a lesson for me to learn for myself. So another thing that you can do is ask for help. I know it's like, it seems, obvious, but, our society has a very, very, very heavy stigma on asking for help. There's like a very pervasive, negative, detrimental mentality that says, oh, well, only sick people need help. Are you kidding me? Only sick people need help. Oh my God. That's what I hear too. Only sick people need therapists. Only sick people need, only people like that can't handle it need coaches. Really? Can you handle it? How well have you been handling it? I'm just saying. I love you. Really. I mean, this is kind of like the tough love kind of person that I am. When people say like that, say stuff like that to me, that's my response, is like, well, how well have you been doing on your own? The best and most successful people, best minds and most successful people in this world have asked for help, have gotten mentorship, have, even paid, hundreds of thousands of dollars to be in masterminds so that they can be surrounded by the people that will get them the results. It's a recipe. If you follow the recipe, you'll make the cake. If you don't follow the recipe, God knows what the fuck you'll end up with, right? So ask for help. If you find you need help, ask for help. There is no negative stigma on asking for help. And the only negative stigma that you hold is the one that you hold in your head that somebody else gave you. It doesn't have to be that way. So embrace your spirituality. That's a huge, huge thing, and that goes along with self-care. Like I said, all of these kind of fall under self-care. But embrace the spirituality, the yoga, the meditation, dance meditation, creative journaling. All of this stuff is spiritual. Be mindful, be present. There are lots of mindfulness exercises and techniques. I use several of them myself, to ground yourself and be 100% present in the present moment. And what really, if you're trying to serve someone and heal them and help them and caregive for them, what better gift or present, right, can you give them than to be present? Because if you're off in some, other fucking worry, you're not being 100% present. You're not giving your best of yourself to that person that, or being that you are trying to care for. So you end up working against yourself, which is a lot of, how we even end up in this burnout, and compassion fatigue place to begin with. And last but most certainly not least, and is always under the self-care train, is be grateful. And this is another one that I had a hard time, integrating, because it's like, oh, well, that's just, people just say that, but, it doesn't really work. And, like, what kind of results do you get from just being grateful? Like, what does that even do? it changes your life. It changes your life. If you don't have a gratitude journal, start one. I thought it was really hokey at first too. Really, I did. Because I was like, what if, like, how is this going to help? Really, because it has to do with the mindset. It has to do with the energy that you are putting out into the world. It has to do with what you are focusing on. And if you have been trying to heal yourself and do self-help for any length of time, chances are you have heard this, that the law of attraction and all of that stuff, what you focus on is what you manifest. Which is really where we're going with all of this. Which is really where a lot of my coaching comes in, is that what you focus on, you manifest. So be grateful. If you are grateful, if you are full of gratitude for whatever you already have, if you have a strong family, be grateful. If you don't have a strong family and you're footloose and fancy free, be grateful. There are positive sides to almost every story. And so you have to be able to find something to be grateful for. Because if you are then able to focus on the positive emotions of what you have right now in front of you, it really opens the doorway to be able to receiving what's out there for you, that's like literally just waiting out there. Because, like you'll hear me say, if you haven't already before, is that, the whole universe and, God and the source and, your higher self and everything, they're all always conspiring for your best, highest good, even when it doesn't seem like they are. And generally, I do have to say that when it seems like they aren't, that's because we're standing in our own way. Which is a whole nother topic for a whole nother time, but I found that to be absolutely true. So be grateful. Be grateful wherever you live. If you live in a tundra, be grateful for the beautiful snow. I lived in Southern California for almost 20 years. We never saw a lick of fucking snow. I actually had to move all the way across the country so I could experience seasons again because it was draining my soul. So you want to be grateful. So that way you focus all that energy on the positive energy on what you have, so you are able to manifest more positive things as opposed to constantly focusing and having a preoccupation with the suffering, which is what is bringing suffering into our lives. It sounds crazy, but I promise, if you give it a try for a long enough period of time, it will actually work. Because that's the key to a lot of the stuff that we're ever going to talk about, is that you have to do it consistently. You have to have consistency and you have to do it consistently. If you do it one day, it's not going to do anything. I mean, like I said, you've probably all gone to therapists and the therapist was like, oh yeah, you're stressed, go to Hawaii for 2 weeks. And you're like, great, yay, I have an excuse to go to Hawaii for 2 weeks. Well, when you get back, how do you feel? Like crap. That's because it's basically like walking into a doctor's office with cancer and them giving you a Band-Aid. If you don't work on the stuff, if you don't dig out all the stuff that, is causing the problem, you're never going to get to it. That's like, constantly treating the symptom instead of the disease. So that is my 3,000 cents on it. You're always going to get you're always going to get 1,000% from me. So if you have any more questions, please throw them in the comments. I would love to help you out and give you more resources. Like I said, I'm going to be posting that professional quality of life test up in the comments. And so please do take that, and then take some of these things into consideration as to what you can do for self-care and how you can actually start having a self-care regimen for yourself. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, Daniela, I absolutely have no time. No time. I have to say to that, make time. I really do. I must implore you to make time for yourself, because if you don't make time for yourself, no one's going to make time for yourself, and then you're going to stay burnt out and unhappy, and you're just going to keep rolling in the same direction that you are rolling in, and that direction probably sucks. So have a look. Take the time, even if you have to wake up, 15 minutes earlier or go to bed 15 minutes later, just so you can get in a stretch or a meditation. got to start somewhere. Baby steps, baby steps. Little step will do you. So just keep doing it consistently. You know, as they say, success is, you know, a series of small steps done every day that add up to a big result. So thank you all so much. I will see you around for our next video. So I hope you all have a fabulous start to your 2018 and are able to use this information to start to heal yourself of your compassion fatigue so that then you can continue on being the best caregiver and healer and teacher that you can to those around you. So thank you so much for hanging out. I will see you again soon. This has been Daniela of ReDesign Your Life.